Blessings and welcome everyone, Nico here, and in today's video we are going to be talking about thought forms. What thought forms are, what they are not. We got to clear up some confusion and some misunderstandings and mischaracterizations that the term has gotten over the years. How they are created and how they function, what they actually do, how they operate. This is kind of an introduction as well to the topic of poltergeists. I will be coming out with a video about poltergeists soon, but I want to have an intro talk to thought forms because most of the time when it comes to energetic, spiritual, psychic, or supernatural disturbances, people are dealing with thought forms, not necessarily ghosts or demons or elementals or nature spirits, but they are dealing with thought forms. To begin, I want to focus on just talking a bit about what separates a thought form from maybe one of those other spirits, as well as what separates a thought form from, say, a spell or any kind of magical or spiritual working, whether it's a blessing or it is a protection spell or whatever. There is a big difference to keep in mind. Thought forms are created by people. Thought forms are created by beings who are here in the physical by imbuing their own thoughts or their own emotions with life force. And that is what separates thought forms from, say, a demon or an elemental or a ghost as well. Thought forms are born of our life force. And so you might call that chi, or you might call that haku, whatever term you have for the life force that is within your energy fields that animates and operates your spirit in form. That is also what thought forms are made of. Spells are not made of this life force. Spells are typically made with universal energies, divine energies, or elemental energies, or other kinds of non-physical, non-of-the-world energy forces, not life force, not chi. And that does make a big difference in what we're going to talk about next, which is how thought forms operate. So thought forms themselves do carry a certain level of sentience or a certain level of consciousness to them, but they are not ensouled. They do not have their own independent journey. They are not a part of, I guess, what you would call the universal cycle of life, the way elementals or maybe ghosts, or yes, even to a certain degree, demons might. And even though it's a little bit confusing because some people use all these terms interchangeably, a thought form is a construct. It is either a mental construct or an emotional construct that has been energized. Thought forms themselves take on lives of their own more often than not. Whereas, again, a ghost or an elemental or a demon is going to have more conscious awareness, more sentience, and have a more clear and defined life path. A thought form is just going to kind of roam, latch, attach. It doesn't really have a whole lot more it can do. It's got a very limited life function. And so very much like a robot, it is only going to do what it is. When we have a thought form occupying a space, or maybe a thought form attached to a person, this is typically picked up because the space or the person is carrying some kind of vibrational match that is complementary to the existence of that thought form, or that thought form has been projected or dislodged or discharged into that space at some point in time and is somehow getting re-energized and re-upped over and over and over again. This usually occurs when you have a situation where a person or a group of people initially energize and spawn the thought form and then continue to re-energize it as time goes on. And you can see this with individuals, and you can see this with communities, groups, families. And this, of course, does also include online, because the internet, forums, social media, that is actually a space. You can think of that almost like a pocket dimension. It operates as both a container and a conduit. And people do dump their energies, emotional, mental, and spiritual, in those spaces all the time. And therefore, will also energize their own thought forms and thought forms for each other. And of course, when we have that maybe going on in a house, a workspace, or maybe a certain type of land or property, you could have many thought forms kind of roaming about aimlessly, right? Without any kind of real awareness. They're not really alive, latching on, feeding on, or trying to create or precipitate what it is in that environment, or what it is made of in that environment. A thought form is not a mental image. It is not a thought itself. It is not something that might be considered a visualization. That is a misunderstanding, as well as just an incomplete idea that has been purported by the New Age. I definitely, again, as somebody who has a foot in both worlds, kind of the New Age and the more pagan, magical, supernatural, that is one of the things that I despise the most about what has happened or come of the New Age. But what can you expect from maybe a culture that a lot of people in that culture have sort of stopped at the law of attraction with and called it good, right? One half of one of 12 Hermetic principles. I don't think people should be doing coaching on something where they've forgotten the other 11 and a half Hermetic principles. I don't think they should be writing books about it. Anyway, I'm going to get off track. When we have a thought, or we hold a visualization, or we have an image in our mind, or maybe a subject of our attention, whether it is a desire, or it is an objective, or it is an object, or it's a person or a space, that is not creating a thought form then and there. That is just a thought. That thought needs to actually be cultured and grown and energized first. Typically what happens in the process of birthing a thought form is a person will tend to fixate, concentrate, brood, or dedicate a great deal of their emotional, spiritual, and mental attention towards the thought or the stimulus in front of them, which at first creates a link. Now, that link itself is not necessarily always going to create a cord or an attachment to the person, but the very energy, the very density that that kind of link is made of is also what gives a thought form a coherent form or a cohesive whole. So something's got to hold that thought form together, or else that energy is just going to disperse. It's going to dissipate. It's not going to do anything. So when a person is fixating and they're focusing and they're dedicating a lot of time and energy to this thought or to this stimulus, or to this thing that they're looking at, or this person that they're focusing on, they will tend to attach a link through that fixation, consciously or unconsciously. And most thought forms are unconscious. A lot of people maybe don't know what they're doing when they're getting into these states of fixation or intensity. And they will wrap their thought and all of that life force they are dedicating to that action or to that moment, they will wrap that thought in that life force, and then you will have the thought form grow in that container. And thus the thought form is born. Thought forms themselves, because they are made of life force, do depend on life force to survive. Therefore, they tend to latch or be magnetized towards spaces where there is a great deal of life force that is also a harmonious match for what they are made of. Thought forms will occupy, if a thought form is made, for instance, of greed, I want what he has. I want to be the richest person in the world. I want all of this power and influence. I want attention. I want affirmation. I want to control everyone, or whatever is going on there. That will, of course, if it spawns off, get stuck in spaces or latch on to people that may be taking on a lot of energy or vibrations of that kind of greed or that aspiration, whether they have taken that on from other people or they have taken it on by creating or vibrating that themselves, right? What goes on in our energy field does precipitate what is drawn to us and what sticks to us in our reality. And so a thought form may stay with that very person, or stay where that person left it, or get projected out in the direction of their goal or somebody they associate positively or negatively with their goal. You can also find that, say, in situations where there is a lot of need being pushed into a thought form as well, that people often end up getting drained. The thought form itself is, of course, precipitating a lot of distractions and also pulling a lot of life force out of a space or out of a person or out of a group, or triggering all kinds of different negative stimuli in that person or in that group to get them to give more life force to that thought form. This is especially difficult online, especially where you have people who have no scruples whatsoever about throwing car crashes of emotions and spiritual vitriol and social vitriol and mental instability at each other all of the time. And you can find that people are not only cooking up little individual thought forms, but big, hulking, belligerent thought forms that are created by, upwards of hundreds of thousands of people even. The good news is that when you are dealing with thought forms, they are very easy to break. They're very easy to dissipate. Thought forms are the easiest spiritual disturbance to dispel and neutralize. Because when we are clearing, when we are cleansing, whether it's with sound or with smoke or with salt, we are shattering and scattering that life force and cleaning it off, breaking the thought form apart, in essence, turning it into dust, never to be recalled, so long as we don't go and re-up on more of that energy from a certain type of interaction, a certain type of fixation, or maybe, going back to a certain circle or a certain community or a certain group and bathing in that yuck once more. So how do you know when you have a thought form versus, say, a ghost or an elemental in your space? Or how do you know when you're dealing with a thought form versus, say, an attachment to a person or a cord or a projection from another person? Well, first off, a thought form is a type of projection. And there can be certain things that launch those things into action, usually something, mentally, emotionally explosive in an individual or a group. So, it could be that you're dealing with both. But the way I have found is the best and simplest way to detect whether or not you are dealing with a thought form or something that actually is alive and a part of the cycle of life and not an emotional or mental or psychological construct or spiritual construct, is simply note what you can't get when it comes to communication. And we talk about communication here, you don't necessarily have to be a medium for this. Thought forms are born of fixation and focus. They really only have a one-tracked mind, if a mind they have. They tend to be stuck in a very specific type of emotional resonance. And so a thought form that is just always angry, always frustrated, always jealous, always lustful, always attached, or whatever is going on, is never going to do anything else. A thought form is in a very strict and highly regulated, self-imposed routine. And what happens is that when you're dealing with thought forms, you can kind of tell. You yourself may find that that mood or that energy becomes somewhat infectious. Now, depending on where you are when it comes to your own mental and spiritual discipline, it may take a while for you to pick up on that happening to you. But if you are up on that, then you're going to go, you know what? I kind of noticed that there was sort of a weird mood swing just a second ago, or I can't seem to focus on something else. I can't seem to think about something else. Hold on, I need to go cleanse. I need to go clear. I need to go reset outside. I need to go get myself put back together, because obviously I'm dealing with a thought form. Maybe it was something I picked up at the store. Maybe it was something that I accidentally created. Maybe it was something I got from that horrible Twitter thread. That happens. Pay attention to where you are, where you've been, and where some of these things might be latching on or finding their way to you. If you want to better protect yourself and protect your space, keep a mental log of where you are, what you're doing, and who you're interacting with when these energy forms present, where they are coming from, what is going on, and where it keeps coming from, so that you know how to shut it down, how to protect yourself and reject those energies, those attachments, those projections, and of course those constructs, right? Because a lot of the worst thought forms that we've got going on in the world right now are emotional constructs from mentally, spiritually, and emotionally dysregulated, unstable people and communities, just throwing them out there. And it's our job as responsible spiritual practitioners to dispel and neutralize them so that they do not precipitate anything just for being what they are. So that is a little chat about thought forms. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. And of course, stay tuned. We're going to be coming back and talking about poltergeists real soon. And if you have any questions about thought forms, I would love to come back and address this topic again. But I figured let's just do a little intro and see how that goes. So you all take care, and I will see you all again soon.